Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
We're going to do more of Rav Soleveitchik today, ideas about God as they pertain to the Siddur. That's our overall theme for the last 2.5 years. I'm going to try to get through 2 ideas, and then we're going to take 3 weeks off, Hanukkah, plus 2 weeks of winter break. So after today, our next class, God willing, will be on January 6th. And part of why also I'm taking the time off is there's a long Rav Soleveitchik chapter that I think is worthwhile, and it's going to take us a few weeks. So that's going to occupy us for much of January, and then we'll move forward. But I don't want to start it because if we stop in the middle, we'll never, we'll have to start all over again. So this will be our last meeting in 2025. And then, God willing, we'll meet the first Tuesday in 2026. Okay? That's the plan. So we've been reading Rav Soleveitchik on his ideas about the Amidah, the structure of the Amidah, God's majesty, Hod v'Hadar in the first section, our aloneness and neediness, our tzara in the second section, the middle section, petition, and then God's chesed in the third section, which is called, generally in rabbinic literature and Rambam, gratitude, but he talks about it as recognition of God's kindness. And he's going to come back to that. But the chapter we were reading last time, and I sort of avoided talking about this, but it's more important to acknowledge it today. He's actually, from what we were reading last week, he's not actually talking about the Amidah. He's talking about Psalms. He's talking about particularly Psalm 103 and 104. Psalm 104 is familiar to us because it's the Rosh Chodesh Psalm, which we're going to say, which we say every Rosh Chodesh. And more specifically today, part 1 of what we're talking about today, he's talking about an idea in the Psalms more so than the Amidah. Okay? So it still relates to the Siddur, although it's not the Amidah. That's where we're at. Let me screen share. Let me figure out what I want to screen share. It keeps going away. There it is. Okay. First of all, we're gonna do part of. Let me go to the sharing. Part of the chapter from last week where we stopped. This is something we did not read. Okay. I'm gonna be up and down for a second till I find it. Okay. Give me just a moment. Right, it talks about the psalm being about the majesty of God. These psalms with the majesty of God. Fire surrounds him, clouds. You've read a lot of those psalms, I'm sure. Okay. And he refers to this, and Terry says, why the Latin? The numinous presence, numen being the awesome, tremendous thing which is beyond our articulation. Okay. And on page 71, here he talks a little bit about the aspect of God as numinous that is frightening to us, right? If you think about some of the Psalms, they talk about Hashem's overarching dominance and power. He causes the mountains to melt, etc., those sorts of things, which are actually frightening. So,
do you intend to be sharing?
Do I intend to be sharing? Yes, I do.
Because we don't see anything.
You don't see anything.
I'm
seeing it very clearly.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my fault.
It's okay. Maybe it may have to do with your view. You have to change your view. Okay. So there's something in all these Psalms about God through nature. There's something beautiful, okay, but also something awe-inspiring and even frightening, okay? Top of page 71. To come close to God, according to this verse, it doesn't matter what the verse is. We've read the verses like this 1,000 times. Here's the verse. The earth shook and trembled. The foundations of the hill moved and were shaken because of God's anger. They went up a smoke out of God's nostrils and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. Okay? So to come close to God, according to this verse, is tantamount to self-effacement. Contact with God undermines the very existence of the human individual. The great fire engulfs the little candle. I am the little candle. God is the great fire. God is the, tremendous mystery of the universe. I'm like a little speck. Okay. That was ad-libbing. Going back to the text, the great fire engulfs the little candle. Infinity is not only the womb from which finitude emerges, meaning the origins of the universe, but also the bottomless abyss into which it plunges in its quest for the unattainable. The human seeks in vain to hide. Okay. This numinous character, next paragraph, is very characteristic of our religious consciousness. God is not only a sustaining, merciful, and loving creator and parent, but also a negating and devastating power who mercilessly extinguishes life and existence. God's face is radiant with joy. Quoting the Psalm, I behold your face in righteousness, and I will be satisfied when I see you. At the same time, however, no one may see God's face, for mere glance at God's countenance results in disastrous termination of one's life, as Hashem says to Moshe, when Moshe says, I want to see your kavod, and God says, no one can see me and live. Okay, so there is something about apprehension of God when we contemplate God that is beautiful and terrifying. Okay, that's the idea here. Okay, now we want to get to, and I'm not sure how he made the jump here. Okay, the Psalm, I'm in the highlighted paragraph on page, for those who are reading at home, page 72. The Psalm emphasizes another element in our religious experience. This is important. This is what I wanted to get to. The absence of God, numen absens, the absence of God. Here, the human is daunted and shocked not by the divine presence, but by something else. Man is awestruck by God's absence. God befriends humans and animals, plays with, cares for, and caresses them lovingly. Creatures feel close to God. Faith in God as a companion and undismayed trust in God's word are suddenly disrupted when God hides God's face and disappears from their midst, leaving behind nothingness and a silent desert. Man is shattered and stunned, perplexed and frightened. These unpredictable hidings of the face, the withdrawals on the part of God, are felt in awe and amazement. The divine, many a time, evaporates from creation like the morning dew, and when God, who just touched our head tenderly, is gone, we feel forlorn and small and worthless. You hide your face, they are confused. I believe this is a direct quote from Psalm 104, the Rosh Chodesh Psalm. The feeling of God's absence is the great mysterium tremendum, the tremendous mystery. The individual human stands in fear and tremor before the absent God and implores God to return. Okay, let's pause. Now, we're familiar with this idea from various other Psalms, right? Just think of Psalm 30, right? The one right before, am I thinking of Psalm 30? The one right before Baruch She'amar, right? Hisarta fanecha hayiti nivhal. When you hide your face, I am terrified. All right, I plead before you. Don't ignore me. Or Psalm 27, which we say during the high holidays at the end of, well, either at the beginning of davening or at the end of davening, depending on your shul, right? I guess I got to find it now that I said it. Don't hide your face from me. Don't turn away from me. I'm terrified. Don't abandon me. By the way, who said this? Don't abandon. Why have you, oh God, why have you abandoned me? What famous Jew said that? Paul is smiling. Paul, you're muted. I think you're muted, or talk louder. What famous Jew said, my Lord?
Jesus.
Jesus, my God, why have you abandoned me? Eli, Eli, lama zanachthani, right? Another version of lama azabtani. And we read this in many Psalms. On the one hand, we feel God's beauty and power. On the other hand, the psalmist frequently feels abandoned. Why does the psalmist feel abandoned? Because the psalmist says, I'm drowning, seaweed is covering my head, I'm stuck in the mire, my enemies are surrounding me and mocking me, my bones are trembling and I'm sick unto the death. So there are many expressions in Tehillim, in the Psalms, of where are you? You feel totally absent. We have uncovered in these great hymns near the bottom of the page the disturbing notes of the numinous presence and the baffling experience of divine absence. Now, back to the beginnings of modernity. Mordechai Kaplan. What would Mordechai Kaplan say? Why does Why does the psalmist experience God that way? Because God is absent, because there is no supernatural giant spirit outside the universe taking care of everything. Everything that we call God or religion or the holy is only, and now I'm going to say only, okay, only or just the projection of our thoughts, feelings, and aspirations. It's only a projection of the human, right? So Mordechai Kaplan would say to the psalmist, yeah, you know why you feel why there's nothing out there? Because there's nothing out there, okay? If what you're talking about spirituality and God is out there, okay? There may be something that we project and long for out there, okay? But there isn't. Now, Rav Soloveitchik rejects this position and he makes a jump. And this jump is his leap of faith. I think it's just a leap of faith. It's his certainty. And you could say, well, it's because he's Orthodox. That's why he thinks this. It's traditional. It is his certainty that Hashem exists even when God appears to be absent. God's absence is a temporary appearance. It's not an illusion. God sometimes, again, I'm using very anthropomorphic language from our tradition, the human being sometimes experiences God as you hid your face from me. I'm in the next chapter now, the next handout, page 74, 2 stars near the top. Therefore, he says, to be religious is not to be confused with living at ease, with unruffled calmness and inner peace. Don't think that if you live in relationship with Hashem, that means all the time you feel good inside and you have inner peace. On the contrary, the religious life is fraught with emotional strife, intellectual tensions, which ravel and fray its harmony. The religious experience not only warms, but also chills with horror. The religious is not only swayed by joy, but also by sadness and pain. I'm going to keep reading even though I didn't highlight. All the modern theories about the healing function of religion see only one phase of the religious experience, the sublimated one. Sublimated means sublime, I think is what it meaning. Oh my God, God is sublime. God is in the sunrise. God is in birth and the beauty and all that. No, he says that's only one part of the religious experience. But at a more primitive stage, the religious experience is marked by the chill and rigor of the unknown. Only when the human individual lives through the great encounter with the unknown in the night of doubt, suffering, incessant dread, and depression. I know Carl is not going to like this, his existential theology. Only when the person has done that, then does one experience the daybreak of a cheerful faith, full of promise of delivery and bliss. Package deal, says Rav Soleveitchik. Okay? There is the lonely night of the soul. And then he goes back to Jacob wrestling with the Ish. Okay? Then there's daybreak and you get a blessing. But only after the lonely, tragic, abandoned feeling of the life, of the feeling that comes with the lonely night. I want to see if I want to pause. He comes back to, I have it down on page 75, compare with Kaplan, okay? Back to the absent God. The last paragraph on page 75. The experience of numen absens, the absent God. God, why have you abandoned me? You're nowhere. Why am I drowning? That's what that means. The experience of the absent God in the cosmic process has been intensified in modern times with the dizzying success of scientific achievements and technological conquests. The machine, whose major performance is an assembly of coordinated subfunctions, has become the cornerstone of our world philosophy and has shut out the vision of God. Not always do the heavens proclaim the glory of God. Instead, we encounter a seemingly unresponsive attitude on the part of the cosmic forces towards man, our needs and aspirations. The human feels a grisly emptiness and chilling cruelty pervading the uncharted lanes of the universe, encumbering vast, almost endless distances, that's the universe, suggest to us the stillness, darkness, and insensation of being, which is intimately knit with non-being. Nature is cool, mechanical, and devoid of meaning. The human, searching for salvation, is a tragicomical figure crying out to a mute, insensible environment which does not share our troubles and suffering. What he's saying is, in general, the modern scientific view of the world tends to support the experience of the absent God. The universe is vast and doesn't care. People get cancer and die because their cells go awry. It's impersonal, okay? There's nothing personal behind it. To which, again, Mordechai Kaplan would say, yes, that's the truth. Okay, paragraph in the middle of the page. This feeling, he says, there's two things that give us this feeling. One, this feeling stems from the depths of our religious consciousness whenever we encounter stupendous nature, ruthless and inconsiderate towards humanity. The fact of natural catastrophes, disease, starvation, and physical pain bears witness to the loneliness and helplessness of the human amidst strange surroundings and their estrangement from God, who hides God's face. Okay? So there's what's the word? When the underground earthquake causes the tsunami. Sorry. There's a tsunami or cancer, and that just makes it feel like we are totally alone in the universe. We do not control these things. They come from nature, and nature doesn't care. So when I look at nature, I say God is absent. Second, in the historical realm, the numinous comes to expression when the human suddenly becomes aware of the unreasonableness of historical occurrence. Instead of advancing toward the realization of great destiny, history recedes, sweeping humans and events towards their primeval beginning and savagery. October 7th, the Shoah, Stalin, right? You look at history and you say, God is absent. So whether you look at the universe or you look at human history, the universe, which is cold and doesn't care, and things just happen regardless of what we say or do, or if you look at the savagery of history, one says God is absent. The parallelism between the historical and cosmic process is striking. The encounter with unreasonableness occurs in both realms. I would substitute for unreasonableness. I think what he means by this is absurdity, which is what some people translate Ecclesiastes, Kohelet's Hevel Havalin. Everything is absurd. It's absurd, okay? Nature, we suffer and die. History, we torture each other. It's all absurd. And God appears to be absent. Top of the next page. Many a time man wonders whether or not God cares to intervene on our behalf. The tragic search for God, who hides God's face, is the great undertaking of human, and it frequently ends in despair and resignation. The Time magazine cover from whatever year, The Death of God. I don't know. Anyone remember what year that was? 1960 something? I don't remember. The Bible abounds in the complaints and pleas of the prophets, who, even as they were committed to God and had unshakable faith in God, were frightened by God's absence from their midst. They were terrified by thoughts of the void, the weird darkness and chaos preceding creation, and dismayed by prayers unheard, sacrifices rejected, martyrdom incurred seemingly in vain. The prophet shudders, seeing a world ruled by inhumanity and brutality. The prophet encounters the numinous absence of God with despair, and yet, I want to get to the yet, each chapter or each prophet, if you look at the book of prophecy, each prophet closes with an optimistic, cheerful note of faith and redemption. All right, I don't want to go on and on about solitary man who dreads the unknown, who feels lost in the boundless universe. Okay? But, top of the next page, the human being shows remarkable resilience. In Judaism, the numinous experience is a prologue to redemption. We hope to free ourselves finally from the dreadful and to march forward towards happiness and bliss. The final destination of the religious experience is called eschatology, the end time, when the now unknown will appear in our midst as an old friend and acquaintance, when humans will see God, feel God's presence, and enjoy God continually. So what he says is, yet in Judaism, it is, I believe he is saying, it is an article of faith, and he accepts that faith. He believes in that faith, that the experience of God being absent which he says is the experience of loneliness here. Sorry, I'm skimming. Causes us, I think I'm going to stop sharing, but there's always at the end of that message, and again, I just want to say this is an article of faith, but God will appear and save me. Even though, right, I think of Psalm 27, high holidays. Even though father and mother may abandon me, ki avi ve'imi asfuni, azavuni, varonai asfeni. Even though my father and mother may abandon me, God takes me in. Even though I may feel alone, ultimately in the end, I know that I'm never alone. And he says, all of the prophets, all of the Psalms end on this note. There is the contemplating the universe or history may give us a feeling of God's magnificence. It also gives us a feeling of God's absence. Eli, Eli, lama azabtani. My God, why have you abandoned me? But then ultimately, and this, he sort of doesn't really explain this. I want to be, it's a little bit sleight of hand. Sorry, being derogatory, I would call it sleight of hand. Being less derogatory, I would call it faith. Okay? He says, but yet the story always ends with salvation. The story in the prophets and the Psalms always ends with salvation. My individual life might not always end with salvation. Our moment in history may not end in salvation, but there is ultimately salvation. I mean, just think of what all the Psalms say, right? Eventually the Mashiach comes and there'll be a ruler who will rule justly, and, the lion will lie, like Isaiah says, the lion will lie down with the lamb, and the wolf will lie down with the lamb, and the lion will munch on hay just like cattle, meaning an era of peace over the world, right? So there is a belief, and he doesn't explain, I think, how you get to that, but there is a certainty that it will end differently despite the temporary apparent absence of God. It's only temporary. It's because God hides God's face. Kaplan would say, no, you're wrong. There's nothing out there. Soleveitchik would say, no, our entire tradition teaches us that God's hiding of God's face is only temporary. And I think this is just, I think he can't prove that to the satisfaction of Spinoza or Kaplan. He just says, I know that's what's true. How do I know that's what's true? Because that's what our tradition teaches. Because our tradition is all about the hiding of God's face is only temporary. I'm going to pause, Larry, and I'm going to stop in 5 minutes. Larry.
I probably have this wrong, Avi, but some of what you read and you said seems to me to be a answer to the question, why do bad things happen to good people? Or why do people feel sadness and despair? And it seems like Soloveitchik is saying, at least in part, that's the path to God. If you in fact didn't have that experience, if you were only ever happy, you wouldn't be able to find the path to God. And even more so, and this is your area, not mine, I just looked it up. Apparently, there's no psychological condition that prevents people from feeling sadness or being unhappy. But we know that there are personalities that aren't disposed to that, and there are people who benefit from their material condition that they are comfortable and they don't have any sadness. And a corollary would seem to be those people cannot experience God in the same way that those of us who feel the sadness experience it. The last thing I'll say simply is that's kind of a musical theme as well. They say in order to play the blues, you've got to experience the blues. You can only play that music when you've truly experienced the depths of despair.
So one could say that. I think he would generally agree. Remember, we read all that stuff about the fundamental loneliness, all the existential thing, all the stuff about the middle section of the Amidah, because I'm alone and I'm needy. And he does say the only thing that soothes that neediness, my aloneness, is realizing that I'm not alone. There is a companion, okay? And that companion is God. In your aloneness, you find that you're not alone. Not exactly what you said, Larry, a little bit different. The other thing I want to take us to, the thing you made me think of was something totally different, is that we're reading on the individual scale, right? How the individual experiences God, which is, of course, the Psalms are mostly individual, or at least the Psalms he's talking about are the Psalms of the individual. right? I am drowning. Don't hide your face from me. Save me. And then, of course, the positive, I know I will come into your temple and give psalms of thanksgiving because I know you will save me, right? He's not dwelling on that part yet. But I want to just map that onto the cosmic drama. If you just think back to the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, we talked about that in part 2 of Kabbalah, right? The universe is about infinite divine light was poured into the world, into vessels. The vessels could not handle the light, and so they broke, okay? And there are smidgens of light covered by husk klipot, and that is the fundamentally broken nature of the universe. The universe is, at this moment in time, fundamentally damaged, and it is our job to try to free the sparks of light from the husks. In other words, it's our job to try to find the divine in everything around us and liberate it so that the world can be fixed. I just want to take you back to that Kabbalah thing, right? To combine the Yud Hey with the Vav Hey, right? The Shekhinah, God's presence in the world. I'm taking very far afield, but I'm taking you back months, right? The Shekhinah is estranged. God's presence in the world is estranged somehow from the divine presence above, and it is our job to connect them through doing mitzvot. We do mitzvot. We are trying to, I'm being a little bit chutzpahdik, heal the divine, heal the damaged universe. Divine is part of the universe. For Rambam, there's something God is unchangeable outside of the universe. For Kabbalah, there is something outside, maybe outside. It's called the Ein Sof. There's some part of God we don't really understand. So it's the infinite, and you'll never understand it. So don't worry your pretty little head trying to understand it. But in terms of the divine presence in this world, it is fundamentally, a little chutzpahdik to say, but this is what Kabbalah of the Ari says, it is fundamentally damaged. How do you know it's damaged? Just look at the world. What's your job? To help repair the damage. And this is why Chabad goes out and says, put on tefillin, light Shabbos candles, because they fundamentally believe they're Hasidim, they are heirs to the Kabbalah of the Ari, and they believe that every mitzvah a person does is 1 micrometer step towards healing the damage in the universe, which is very different than, and so I'm waiting for God to swoop in, which is kind of the classic salvation. God's going to do something. God's going to stop abandoning me, right? And the Kabbalah says, no, it's actually up to us. We're not 100% up to us, but we're co-partners in doing that. It can't be done without us. The healing can't come without us. The repair cannot come without us. So I'm just linking two very different things, which is I'm trying to sort of superimpose his view of the individual's experience, right, onto Kabbalah's view, or a part of Kabbalah, of the cosmic experience, which is it's only, I'll paraphrase Larry, it's only when one realizes the blues of the universe that one can try to heal the blues. You got to feel the blues, not just to sing the blues, but to heal the blues. But the blues for Kabbalah isn't just my blues. It's the whole universe. Terry, unmute. Got to unmute.
As a layperson, not using this as a term of art, it seems to me that his approach is very depressive.
Well, this is why Carl didn't like it several weeks ago. Right. And he said, but he said earlier, we said a few weeks ago, he said, if you're an honest and contemplative human being, this is a part of what you see. You have the joy at the beauty of the sunrise and the beauty of creation. Okay. Or let's just bring it home, right? You have the joy of the beauty of life and the heartbreak at the tragedy of death. If you're a thinking, feeling human being, you see that, this is the package deal. Joy and heartbreak. His mythic metaphor for it, and we just read it in this week's Parsha, is Yaakov Avinu, our ancestor Jacob, limping but surviving, in pain but alive. Yeah, and he does say, if you're really alive and you really contemplate the essence of everything, you will end up with pain. He's not saying it's only pain. By the way, and then what happens to Jacob? He gets a blessing, and the sun rises. And he uses this image several times, and the sun rises on him limping. Both are true. He's in pain, and the sun rises. And I think Rav Soloveitchik would say that is a metaphor and a mythic image for the fundamental human stance if you are a thinking, feeling, and successful human being. Because the successful part is, but the sun rises and you keep walking even though you're limping. And then I think he would link that to the Psalms, because the sun will rise, because there will be good things in the end. And again, I think he just says this. This is our Jewish, he doesn't really say this, but this is our Jewish article of faith. This is the psalmist's certainty. There will be salvation, to take it to universal terms, because the lion will lie down with the lamb eventually. How do I know that? One might ask. Because our texts, our tradition tells us that over and over. And Hanukkah, it's a good message on which to end Hanukkah. There is rededication, right? There's redemption from those bad Syrian Greeks. But then what happens in human time? It's not a permanent redemption, right? King Herod and the slaughter of the innocents is 150 years later, and the destruction of the Second Temple is another half a century after that. And the destruction of the Second Temple comes about. Why? According to Jewish theology, because of our internal dissension as the Jewish people, right? It's not a punishment visited on us. Poof. It's something you brought upon yourselves because you human beings, in this particular telling, the Jewish slice of human beings who lived in Eretz Israel, because you all couldn't get your shit together. Pardon me for putting it, okay? You couldn't get it together to liberate the light from the husk. But it can be done. And this is the article of faith. It is, in fact, we have a certainty that it will be the ultimate end of the process. So I think I want to end on that note in 2025, that we have a certainty that salvation, which means the wolf and the lamb lying down together, and the lion eating grass, and the freeing of the divine sparks of light from the husks that cover them over. That's our task. And as Jews, we have a certainty that although the moral arc of the universe may be long, it does, in fact, bend toward justice. So, happy Hanukkah. See you, God willing, in 2026.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.